episode 8 of the Testaments may have just exposed the darkest truth about Gilead yet, because what happened to Hulda proves something terrifying. These girls were never actually meant to be protected. And somehow what makes this episode even more heartbreaking is that Agnes, whether intentionally or not, almost becomes part of the machine that silences her. But here's the question this episode quietly leaves us with. Is this finally the moment Agnes starts waking up to what Gilead really is, or is she still too afraid to fight back? Because after watching episode 8, I genuinely think this might be the turning point for her character. Before we get into the discussion, let's quickly recap what happens in the episode. Agnes takes over narrating duties as the Green Girls begin preparing for their future betrothals, with Gilead pushing them toward marriage and motherhood. But things take a dark turn when Hulda reveals that Dr. Grove sexually assaulted her during her medical appointment. Instead of justice, Hulda is manipulated into silence. Agnes struggles with guilt because she experienced the same abuse herself, and Aunt Lydia offers advice that feels both frustrating and strangely strategic. At its core, Episode 8 isn't just about what happened to Hulda. It's about Agnes realizing how deeply broken the entire system really is. And honestly, this episode starts feeling uncomfortable almost immediately. The reason is simple. Viewers already knew something terrible was probably coming. The last time we saw Hulda, she was practically glowing with excitement after getting her period and officially entering what Gilead considers womanhood. In Hulda's eyes, this was a huge moment. It meant she was finally stepping into adulthood, closer to marriage, closer to purpose, closer to the life she had been taught to want. But fans already knew there was danger hiding behind all of that excitement. Because in Gilead, becoming a woman doesn't mean freedom. It means vulnerability. The moment Hulda was sent for that routine medical checkup with Dr. Grove, most viewers instantly felt uneasy. We had already seen his disturbing behavior through Agnes's own experience earlier in the season. So the tension here feels brutal because the audience already understands the danger long before Hulda does. And I think that dramatic irony is exactly what makes this episode hit so hard emotionally. Hulda still believes the adults around her are there to protect her. The audience knows better. That gap between innocence and reality becomes absolutely devastating once the girls start preparing for betrothals. Now, one thing episode 8 does brilliantly is showing how Gilead disguises oppression as tradition. The girls are gathered for what is essentially supposed to be a lesson about biology and intimacy before marriage. But let's be honest, this isn't education. This is indoctrination. The girls aren't taught about relationships, consent, emotional connection, or bodily autonomy. Instead, everything revolves around obedience and duty. And while all the girls sit there listening, something about Hulda immediately feels off. Her energy has changed. This is someone who usually feels bright, hopeful, and deeply faithful to Gilead's teachings. Hulda has always been one of the more innocent girls, almost painfully optimistic compared to the others. But suddenly, she looks anxious, distracted, afraid. And the moment Agnes pulls her aside afterward, everything changes. Because this is where episode 8 completely punches viewers in the gut. Hulda finally confesses what happened during her appointment. Dr. Grove sexually assaulted her. But the truly devastating part of the scene isn't even the revelation itself. It's Hulda's reaction. She doesn't sound angry. She doesn't accuse him. She doesn't even fully understand what happened. Instead, she blames herself. And honestly, that might be the most horrifying thing about this episode. Because Hulda genuinely believes she somehow tempted him. She thinks she did something wrong. She's terrified she has sinned and might burn in hell for it. Just stop and think about how psychologically damaging that is for this young girl. This young girl has been conditioned so deeply by Gilead that when a powerful adult man abuses her, her first instinct isn't outrage, it's guilt. That right there tells you everything you need to know about how this society functions, because oppression becomes much more effective when victims begin policing themselves. And what makes the scene even sadder is watching Agnes react. Now, this is where I think viewers are probably going to split. Some people are going to feel sympathy for Agnes, others are going to be furious with her. And honestly, I think both reactions are fair. Because Agnes knows Hulda is telling the truth. She knows because the same thing happened to her. She has already experienced Dr. Grove's predatory behavior firsthand. Yet, instead of immediately speaking out, Agnes hesitates. She encourages Hulda to report what happened to the aunts, but she doesn't reveal her own experience. And the episode itself knows this is morally messy. Agnes openly admits in her narration that she isn't being the best friend right now. She recognizes her own cowardice. She understands that she's pushing Hulda to take a risk she herself is too frightened to take. Now, some viewers are absolutely going to judge Agnes here. And honestly, I get it. You could argue she lets Hulda walk into danger alone. You could even say she uses Hulda to test whether justice exists in Gilead before risking herself. That interpretation is completely valid. But at the same time, I think the episode wants us to understand something uncomfortable. Fear changes people, especially inside a system like Gilead. Agnes has spent her entire life learning that powerful men are untouchable and authority figures cannot be questioned. Speaking up isn't just scary, it could destroy her future, her safety, even her survival. That doesn't excuse her silence, but it explains it. And honestly, that moral complexity is what makes Agnes such an interesting character right now, because she's clearly beginning to wake up, but she still isn't brave enough to act. At least not yet. One of the smartest things Episode 8 does is using dream sequences instead of traditional flashbacks to show Agnes's emotional state. And wow, some of these moments are genuinely haunting. At first, Agnes dreams about something hopeful. She imagines dancing with Garth at their wedding, holding on to this fantasy that somehow life might still turn out okay. You can feel how badly Agnes wants normalcy, how desperately she wants love, stability, and escape through marriage. But then the dream suddenly shifts, and this is where things get disturbing. Hulda appears high above them on the school balcony, screaming for Agnes to help her. The symbolism here feels impossible to ignore. Hulda isn't just asking for physical help. She's begging Agnes not to look away, not to stay silent, not to abandon her. But then comes one of the most disturbing visuals in the episode. When Agnes turns back toward Garth, she realizes she isn't dancing with him at all. She's trapped in Dr. Grove's arms. That image says everything. Agnes feels trapped by what happened, trapped by fear, trapped by silence. And while she struggles to escape his grip, Hulda falls to her death. Now, thankfully, this moment turns out to be a nightmare rather than reality. Agnes suddenly wakes up sitting across from Hulda in the lunch hall. But let's be honest, the dream still matters, because dreams in stories like this usually reveal emotional truth. And emotionally, Agnes already understands something terrifying. Silence has consequences. Even if Hulda survives physically, Agnes subconsciously knows doing nothing could destroy her anyway. And unfortunately, the episode quickly proves that fear may have been justified, because when Hulda and Agnes are brought before Aunt Vidala, any illusion of justice completely disappears. And honestly, this scene made my blood boil, because Vidala's first reaction isn't concern, it isn't protection, it isn't accountability, it's damage control. She immediately begins trying to convince Hulda that she misunderstood what happened, that maybe she misread the situation, that maybe Dr. Grove didn't mean anything inappropriate. And suddenly, the horrifying truth becomes impossible to ignore. Dr. Grove isn't operating outside the system protects him. That distinction matters, because this episode quietly confirms one of the scariest truths about Gilead. Abuse isn't a flaw in the system, it's part of the structure. These girls are conditioned into silence, shame, and obedience, specifically so powerful people remain protected. And sadly, Agnes folds under pressure. She agrees not to mention it again. Now, I know some viewers are going to hate her for that decision, and honestly, I don't blame them. Because from Hulda's perspective, it probably feels like betrayal. But again, I think the show is intentionally forcing us into uncomfortable territory here. Agnes isn't heroic yet. She's scared, and scared people make disappointing decisions. Still, here's where I think the episode 8 quietly shows growth, because eventually Agnes does go to Aunt Lydia, and this scene is fascinating. She never explicitly says Dr. Grove assaulted her too, but she makes it painfully obvious she knows Hulda's telling the truth because something similar happened to her. And Lydia understands immediately. You can see it on her face. For one brief moment, it almost feels like maybe Agnes has finally found someone willing to listen. But this is still Gilead. Nothing is simple here. Lydia's response feels frustrating and complicated at the same time. She basically tells Agnes to wait, to gain influence first, to secure protection through marriage and power before trying to challenge men like Dr. Grove. And honestly, I can already hear viewers arguing over this. Some people are going to think Lydia is protecting the system. Others are going to think she's playing a long game. Personally, I think it's the second option, because Lydia understands how Gilead works better than anyone. She knows direct rebellion gets crushed instantly. So instead, she's thinking strategically. And if I had to guess, I don't think Lydia's going to ignore Dr. Grove forever. Episode 8 honestly feels like it may be quietly planting seeds for his eventual downfall. But the bigger story here isn't Dr. Grove, it's Agnes. Because for the first time, Agnes is seeing the full cost of staying silent. She has now watched someone else suffer exactly the way she suffered. She has seen the adults fail, seen the system protect predators, seen justice disappear right in front of her. And once you truly see something like that, it becomes impossible to unsee. Which is why I honestly think episode 8 may end up being remembered as Agnes's breaking point, because now she knows the truth. The real question is what she does with it. Does she finally fight back? Or does Gilead succeed in turning her fear into permanent silence? And honestly, that question might be what makes episode 9 absolutely explosive.